They told you cannabis was just for fun, or for escape, or for lazy people with no direction, but they lied. Because long before dispensaries and prohibition, cannabis was used in temples, in mystery schools, in sacred rites, by those who didn't want to get high, but wanted to go deeper. This plant wasn't a party favor, it was a portal. You were never supposed to know that. Because the truth is, cannabis has always been a spiritual amplifier, a bridge, a catalyst, but only if used with precision, only if entered with reverence, and only if the user is ready. That's what they don't teach you, that's what they can't teach you. Because once you understand the ancient role of cannabis, not as a drug, but as a frequency tuner, you start to see why it was banned, criminalized, ridiculed, and then conveniently reintroduced as entertainment. Modern culture took the sacred and made it casual because a plant that expands awareness is a threat to any system that depends on your narrow perception. The high was never the point. The silence was, the expansion, the slowing down, the opening of subtle senses you've been trained to ignore. Cannabis has a spirit, and like any spirit, it speaks, but only when you stop trying to control it and start listening. The ancients listened. In India, it was called bhang, offered to Shiva in ritual. In Egypt, it was used in ceremonial ointments by priestesses. In early Christianity, it was infused into anointing oils. This wasn't about escaping life. It was about entering it fully, without filter. But that type of seeing, that type of clarity, dangerous, because it makes you question your conditioning. It unhooks you from the screen. It turns distraction into discernment. And when you begin to see what's beneath the obvious, you start to feel something calling you back. Not to a memory, to your original perception. This plant doesn't give you answers. It pulls away the noise long enough for you to hear your own. And when used in sacred alignment, cannabis doesn't dull you, it tunes you. But that's not what the system wanted. So they stripped it of mystery, flooded it with chemicals, wrapped it in marketing, and made you believe the ritual was recreation. But the plant remembers, and so do you. Cannabis is not here to entertain you, it's here to mirror you. And mirrors aren't always kind. That's why most people don't go inward when they smoke. They go sideways, numb, distracted, detached. Not because the plant failed, but because intention was missing. You were never taught to sit with it in stillness. You were taught to pair it with screens, with snacks, with noise. But cannabis wasn't made for that. Its ancient role was to reveal the unseen, to unlock the inner temple. Shamans knew this, so did mystics, because this plant opens a frequency band that's normally silent. It slows brain waves, it sharpens internal attention, it brings the subconscious to the surface. That's not a side effect, that's the point. And if you enter the space consciously, with breath, with posture, with silence, you'll feel something activate. Pressure in the head, buzzing in the spine, time starting to stretch. That's not imagination, that's entrance. And here's where it gets deeper. The pineal gland, the so-called third eye, contains receptors that respond directly to cannabinoids. Why? Why would your body have a system designed to respond to this plant, unless there was a relationship long before history remembered? Science calls it the endocannabinoid system, but what they don't say is that it's deeply tied to regulation, perception, and, yes, consciousness. This is why the ancients used cannabis in ritual, not recreation. They fasted before smoking. They purified the body. They grounded the energy. They used sound, incense, and darkness. They prepared the nervous system so that the signal wouldn't overload the circuit. Because cannabis, if entered wrongly, can disorient. But if entered properly, it aligns. And in that alignment, you don't just feel calm. You start to perceive reality differently. You see behind words. You feel the vibration of a room. You hear the intention behind speech. You know things without reason. And that level of sensitivity isn't random. It's a gateway to energetic mastery. But most never reach that gate because they were never told it was there. They were sold the symptom, not the sacrament. But you're remembering. You don't need more cannabis. You need deeper presence because the plant doesn't create truth. It amplifies what's already inside you. That's why some get paranoid, some get sleepy, some get euphoric. It's not about the strain, it's about the state of your inner world. Cannabis meets you exactly where you are, then turns up the volume. That's why the ancients never used it casually. They used it to track energy, to map subtle emotions, to stretch their awareness beyond the five senses. They used it for activation, not escape. But what exactly does it activate? Let's go deeper. When cannabis enters the bloodstream, it doesn't just alter perception, it shifts how energy flows through your chakras, specifically the heart and the brow. You may feel your chest open. You may feel a deep sense of unity. You may feel like you're remembering something you never studied. That's because the plant interacts with your emotional field. And when the heart opens, the third eye can follow. This is the hidden link. Cannabis softens the ego, not by force, but by slowing it down. That creates a window, a space between thought and reaction, and in that space is vision. You begin to perceive energy in conversations. You begin to witness your own patterns. You feel when something is off, even if it looks fine. This isn't magic, it's perception, unlocked. And the more refined your inner state, the more precise your insights become. But that's not what they teach, because insight makes you question the program, and people who question don't obey easily. So the system rebranded this sacred plant. They made it a joke, a trend, a product, and yet, the spirit of the plant is still intact. It's waiting for those who remember, those who are ready to sit, to breathe, to listen. Because cannabis will not fix you, it will reveal you. And if this message is resonating, if some part of you is remembering the sacredness they tried to erase, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and don't miss what comes next. This isn't about hype, it's about reclaiming the tools they buried. The question isn't whether cannabis is spiritual, the question is whether you are, because the plant can open doors, but only you can choose to walk through. If you approach cannabis unconsciously, it meets you with confusion. If you approach with reverence, it meets you with clarity. This is why ancient initiates prepared their minds and bodies before ever ingesting it. They weren't afraid of the plant. They respected its intelligence, because cannabis doesn't take orders. It works with you if you show up with the right frequency. Let's break that down. Before any sacred use of cannabis, the ancients understood the body had to be clean. That means clean food, clean water, clean breath. Because the plant is subtle, and subtle energy gets blocked by toxins, stress, and mental noise. So the first key is purification, not perfection, readiness. Then, stillness. You don't scroll, you don't snack, you don't distract, you listen. Because what cannabis unlocks is not entertainment, it's awareness without filter. And that's where most people get scared. Not because the plant creates fear, but because it removes what was hiding the fear. You begin to see your habits, your excuses, your unresolved emotions, and that's the real ceremony. It's not lighting sage and posting about vibes, it's sitting in the raw discomfort of what rises. But through that discomfort comes data. You begin to witness the subtle layers of your own mind. You hear your body. You sense when your energy dips, why, and how to shift it. You become the scientist of your own field, and the plant becomes your microscope. Now combine that with breathwork, or sacred sound, or focused mantra. Suddenly, your awareness expands beyond the physical. You sense energy moving through your spine. You feel warmth at the crown. You notice images, flashes, knowing. These aren't hallucinations. They're fragments of the field, only visible when the noise subsides. And this is where cannabis becomes a spiritual tool, not just a chemical, not because it gives you visions, but because it removes distortion. You begin to understand the language of your own energy, and that language rewrites how you live. So what happens when you use cannabis, right? You stop floating. You start anchoring. Instead of losing focus, you gain it. Instead of spacing out, you tune in. Not to fantasy, to frequency. You begin to realize something huge. This plant wasn't put here to entertain you. It was placed intentionally as a tool for inner technology. Let's go deeper. Your nervous system isn't just a biological system. It's an interface. Your thoughts, electricity, your emotions, magnetism, your body, the conductor. And cannabis? It doesn't relax you. It increases sensitivity in that interface. You start to notice your posture, your breathing, the way your mind loops certain thoughts. You feel where energy flows, where it gets stuck. And if you know what to do with that information, you can begin to reprogram your system in real time. This is why real cannabis ritual isn't passive. It's active stillness, awake observation, silent integration. That's what the mystery schools practiced. They weren't just smoking in caves. They were sitting in specific geometries, using breath in patterns, listening to chants in tuned frequencies. Because when you combine cannabis with sacred structure, it becomes more than a plant. It becomes a signal amplifier. The third eye begins to buzz. Your pineal gland, now no longer clouded by sugar, fluoride, and chaos, begins to receive. You notice synchronicity. Time stretches. You feel in rhythm with something older than memory. And here's the kicker. That rhythm isn't coming from the plant, it's coming from you. The plant just cleared the static long enough for you to hear it again. This is what was taken from you. Not just access to cannabis, access to its sacred use. Because if too many people begin to wake up, not just spiritually, but somatically, they become impossible to manipulate. A person in tune with their energy is harder to sell to, harder to lie to, harder to keep in fear. So instead of banning it completely, they twisted the narrative. From tool to trap, from clarity to escape, from spiritual activation to lazy stereotype. And it worked. But that story's cracking now, because more and more of you are remembering. Not just the truth of the plant, but the truth of yourself. So now you know, cannabis isn't a hack. It's not a shortcut. It's not a spiritual cheat code. It's a reminder. A reminder that your body is already wired for higher awareness. That your nervous system is more than biology. It's a bridge. And that perception isn't just what your eyes show you. It's what your energy allows you to receive. When used with intention, cannabis doesn't give you something new. It gives you access to what's always been there. Your inner vision. Your inner rhythm, your inner compass. But here's the part that changes everything. This isn't about cannabis. It never was. The plant is just the mirror, the key, the door. You are the one who walks through it. You are the technology. You are the ritual. You are the field that activates when the signal clears. And once you feel that, you stop chasing tools. You start becoming the channel. So here's the question. What would happen if you treated every moment of your life with the same reverence you'd bring to a sacred plant ritual? Would your food become fuel? Would your breath become a gateway? Would your words become spells? Drop your answer in the comments. Let them see they're not alone in remembering. Let them see the ritual has already begun.